So what happens when a nation's hope is just gone? When everything you believe in lies in ruins? Today, we're diving into the ancient book of Zecheriah, a text born from a deep crisis that offers this incredible vision of restoration. Let's get right into it.
I want you to imagine something. You've spent your entire life as an exile, hearing stories about a promised homeland, and then you finally get to go back. But when you arrive, the city is just a field of rubble. The very heart of your nation, the great temple, is nothing but a pile of stones. Well, for the Jewish people around 520 BCE, this wasn't imagination. This was reality.
And that feeling right there, that profound despair, is the absolute key to understanding Zechariah's message. See, he wasn't just speaking to a nation with ruined buildings, he was speaking into a massive crisis of faith and identity, what historians call the post-exilic crisis. This timeline really puts their struggle into perspective. Just think about it. Generations were born and raised in a foreign land, dreaming of a home they'd never even seen. They finally get to return in 538 BCE, but almost 20 years later, the temple is still a wreck. That first rush of excitement has completely crashed, leaving behind this tide of apathy and disillusionment.
And it's right there, in this moment of spiritual and physical paralysis, that a new voice cuts through the silence. A messenger who was, you could say, perfectly suited to reignite that fading hope. And that messenger's name was Zechariah. Now get this, he wasn't just a prophet, he was also a priest, and that dual role gave him this unique authority to take on a nearly impossible job, to rally the people to not only rebuild a physical temple, but to rebuild their shattered relationship with the God they felt had completely forgotten them.
Okay, so how on earth did he do it? What was the core of his message? How do you even begin to rebuild a nation's hope from the ground up?
Well, he did it through a series of 8 vivid, symbolic, and honestly kind of surreal night visions. We're talking about horsemen patrolling the earth, a giant flying scroll, and even a woman being stuffed into a basket. These weren't just boring speeches. They were like divine paintings, meant to shock everyone out of their apathy and show them that God was still at work, even when all they could see was rubble.
And these visions weren't just abstract art. They were a clear blueprint for getting back on track. First, a tangible goal. Rebuild the temple. Get to work. Second, a foundational truth. God is still in control of history, folks. Third, a personal challenge. Turn back to God, but for real this time, with genuine repentance. And finally, a breathtaking promise. A future filled with peace, prosperity, and God's presence.
And this right here, it just brilliantly shows the radical shift in perspective Zechariah was offering. He took their present reality, a city in ruins, a faithless community, a forgotten God, and a future clouded with doubt, and he held it right up against the destiny God had in store. A restored city, a faithful people, a recognized sovereign, and a future absolutely filled with glory.
But Zechariah's vision wasn't just about rebuilding a few stone walls. No, the ultimate hope he offered pointed toward a future perfect leader, a messianic hope that would echo for centuries to come. This is perhaps the most powerful prophecy in the entire book. In a world full of conquering warlords on war horses, Zechariah talks about a totally different kind of king, a humble ruler who would bring a universal reign of peace and justice. Can you imagine how absolutely revolutionary that idea must have sounded back then? So what about us? Why does a book written 2,500 years ago still matter today? Let's take a look at its lasting legacy.
When you boil it all down, Zechariah's legacy is really anchored in these huge, future-focused prophecies. The promise of a Messiah, the vision of a glorified Jerusalem, and this incredible hope that one day all nations would acknowledge God's rule. These weren't just fleeting dreams. They became foundational pillars for both Jewish and Christian theology.
And for Christians, this is where the text's enduring relevance really clicks into sharp focus. You see, many scholars and believers see the fulfillment of Zechariah's prophecies in the person of Jesus Christ and in the global community of the church. This connection is exactly why Zechariah is one of the most quoted Old Testament prophets in the New Testament. Which brings us to a final thought. In a world that often feels broken, where we're all surrounded by our own versions of ruins and stalled projects, how does a 2,500-year-old message about finding hope in the middle of despair and looking toward a future of restoration, how does that resonate with you today?